A few years ago, the newly introduced Common Core state standards rocked the education world. According to corestandards.org, the Common Core website, 43 states have currently adopted the standards. With these new standards came a new form of standardized state tests, the PARCC test. Over the course of the last few months, the tests have been administered in 13 of the states who adopted the Common Core standards, according to parkonline.org. Not knowing a whole lot about this test, I talked to staff from 4 different schools located in Fort Collins, Greeley, and Fort Morgan. While all of them had a lot to say about the test, here is a general overview of what the test is.
The PARCC test is the latest incarnation of the standardized testing that is required by the state as a federal mandate, and then passed down to the state, and the state passed down to the districts, and the districts passed on to us. So it is meant to assess student achievement, but it's also meant to assess teacher achievement or teacher effectiveness.
Well, we call it CMAS. That's what the Colorado asks us to call it, but it's administered through Pearson Access, so it's actually the PARCC is the brand name. This is our first time we've administered it, so it's a new format for kids because it's all online, and it's a new format for teachers or proctors, as we are, when we're administering the test. So,
Seeing as how the PARCC or CMAS tests are so different from previous tests, I talked to staff about some of the differences when it comes to preparing for the tests, and also some differences for students who are taking the tests.
in preparation, PARCC provided practice tests, so in both math and language arts, kids got online and practiced using the tools and navigating the testing site, so they felt comfortable with it. Teachers in staff development class or our staff meetings, we practiced getting on so we could understand the different things we had to do as proctors.
So the move from paper to computer, in theory, should be a very, that's awesome because there's no paper. However, the preparation, I would say, was a huge difference. Before, we had to put student labels on, and then we would put them in groups, and so then we would get the tests and we would put them in their little groupings, and then they would take their test, and that's how it went. We grouped them by accommodation before, so that was how we had that group, and so that person that had the accommodation knew what they had to do. With the computer-based testing, the accommodations and the different things for the students are built into the test. So like if it's text-to-speech or if they get other kinds of things, that's part of how you set them up. And then when we set the groups up, then you have to make sure that the students are in the correct groups. And so literally we worked on that for like 2 weeks before the PARCC. And not just like here and there, it was hours a day. In the past, if we had a new student start like that day, oh, no big deal, we have an extra test book, but we'll write their name on it and they're good to go. We started our testing and they're like, oh, this student doesn't have a place to go. Who is this student? I don't know who they are. And so they started like the other week. Well, we're in the middle of getting ready for CMAS, so we didn't know the student started, so they weren't in the system. So I quickly get their information. I have to go up to a computer and make sure that they have all their information that they need because there are required fields in there, and making sure that she has the different accessibility features that she needs, and then plugging into a group, and then make sure that, because each student also has to have a ticket which has their login and password, which allows them into the test, and then within the test, then they have a seal code which then allows them into each section of the test. And so again, that preparation piece of each student needing a ticket and each group needing seal codes, so that's more preparation ahead of time. But I mean, luckily it happened pretty quick, but it's not as simple as just handing them a test booklet and say write your name on it and do your test. Yeah, and so I mean with the paper test, if the lights went out, you still could continue taking your test. Now, there's issues, there could be issues with Wi-Fi. If Wi-Fi isn't working, then you can't take your test because you have no connection to the internet. The actual servers that belong to Pearson who host all the tests. There's the administrative side, so the test administrators that are actually starting the test and managing the groups that they have. All of that has to be working in addition to the actual equipment, so laptops, Chromebooks, whatever you're using, desktops, they have to function correctly in order to make the test work. And so if there's issues, then you're having to restart the computer or the Chromebook or whatever it is, and then once you restart them, then you have to resume the student's test from the administrative side to get them to keep going. So I mean, there's so many different factors that could play into delays or issues.
Which, and as much work as it is, when a computer goes down or struggles, that's easy to fix. I mean, we can do that. We can either replace the computer and, even if we have to resume or whatever. But like Matthew was saying, when the internet goes down or when the Wi-Fi goes down, we're stuck. I mean, we're dead in the water.
In my experience, I've always had to read the entire test, not the reading portion, but the entire writing, every single math problem. But the difference is this year that is read for them on the computer. So they just put on headphones, and any student also has access to the oral testing.
The things when I looked at the practice test, what I noticed is it was more evaluative. Kids had to evaluate things more and provide evidence for their evaluation.
The great thing about the change between paper and the online test is there are different either videos or there's animations of things, so it's interesting for the kids. So it's not just another paper pencil test. That part's really interesting, and so I think that part would be kind of new and exciting for the kids because it's more interactive.
It is more performance based, and I feel like where the old test, there used to be a reading test and then there was a writing test, and while there might have been some of both reading and writing embedded in the other test, it's all very integrated. So every question, it's all building toward it's all mixed, I guess. So even if it is still a multiple choice question, it's building and it's preparing students for a writing question. So it's all combined, which I think is really cool that they can apply, that the writing applies to some of the passages that they read and stuff like that. So.
Hearing about how the PARCC test was more evaluative rather than fill in the blank, I talked to the staff about how the test might be addressing literacy and the standards relating to literacy.
But from what I've seen in the few little peekings over their shoulder, I have noticed that they have some more videos and that they have to reflect, I'm assuming, from the video. They have a lot more typing in the answers instead of there's not as many bubbles. And it seems like they have a lot more passages where they have to highlight certain concepts and copy and drag and stuff. So as far as addressing literacy, it's definitely addressing, I think, a different aspect of literacy than it has before.
Looking at the practice test that we took, it not only showed how tight and how well aligned with the standards, there is a certain level of rigor that was not necessarily always, I mean, it's more rigorous than previous tests, which I think is a good thing. I mean, we're pushing students to be better, to go farther, and we're not only holding students to a higher standard, but we have to hold ourselves to that standard to teach the students that. So.
From what I saw, the performance-based ones, they wrote 3 full essays. I mean, by the end, so they were looking at different sources and for different purposes. Part of it was expository, the next one research, and the last one was narrative. But so then they would have to write a full-on essay or story at the end of each of the performance-based ones.
But with anything new, there is sure to come some pushback. I talked to the staff about any kind of pushback, whether it be from students, staff, or parents. While Matthew McLean and Daniel Cooper mentioned not seeing any pushback at Abner Baker Central in Fort Morgan, which teaches grades 5 and 6, some of the other staff members I talked to from different schools had different insights to the resistance this test is facing.
My experience, parents are not happy about it. They've opted out quite a few kids, actually, because they are tired of the ones I've talked to, at least, of their kid having testing and then ACT testing and then this testing. They're just over-tested. So there's been quite a bit of unhappy parents. There's some parents who doesn't matter. I have yet to meet a teacher at my school who's happy about this, who thinks it's worthwhile or important. We're all kind of doing it because we have to.
But the reality of it is that all the kids are burned out. They're you, where it used to be the exception, now it's the rule. Most of the students that I have are your upper level AP honors type kids, because now I'm teaching theater, and most of the kids who have made it to the senior level in my program are the kids that are vying for valedictorian, and even they talk to me about how they just have no more energy for these tests. They learned a long time ago that it has absolutely zero personal and immediate repercussions for them, and very little long-term repercussions for them.
I think it's not that a standardized test is not worthwhile, but I think the amount of the testing and how much it's taking away from learning in the classroom. Because we have now spent 4 weeks of testing. That is an entire month out of the school year testing, where it just is a lot. It's a lot for the kids to handle, and the kids are also trying to do the ACT testing and then all this. It's just, I think the amount of testing is overwhelming, and I think because there's no buy-in from the kids, it's not valid of what their abilities are, because they don't care, so they just click, type in something. One student, I looked over his shoulder and he said, F this test. That was his response on one of the paragraphs. At least he put a period at the end of it.
I also spoke to a student who wished to stay anonymous. When asked what his opinion of the test was, here is what he had to say. This concern of overtesting is just one of many concerns regarding the PARCC test. Not only did the staff talk about the test taking away from class time, but also some unintended consequences of the test. Teachers are no longer able to reserve labs for students to write papers. IT is unable to assist with problems on classroom computers because they are working on the computers used for PARCC, and so on. But there are upsides to this test. The PARCC test truly is something new and more exciting than previous paper tests. The same student I talked to mentioned the fact that he likes the changes the test made because he is more comfortable with online tests. But even with the upsides of the test, there are some serious downsides. Not only does it take away so much more time from the classroom, but it also takes away resources from the schools. While it is true that PARCC is testing multiple literacies for students, it is unfortunately yet another test. But seeing as how the test is so new, schools and students will have to wait and see what happens with the PARCC test in the future.